All right. I think we're live. Hello and
We're
welcome
live.
to
Hello.
yes. With this is Magic Frank S. Franco Colombo is here. The centrist European, the Central European, I should say.
Central European. I don't think
That's
there's
right.
anything
Sorry.
about me called centrist, but yeah.
Yeah, Central European. He doesn't like to be too far east or nor too far west. And sometimes he's known as I won't even say what I used to call him. It's a scandalous name. But anyways, we won't even go to his name at all. Magic Frank S is all you need to know. And he's here to break down a very difficult topic. As he said, a topic that may be pointless to get into because we'll just lose followers over it. People just get upset. And, there's a degree of truth to that. But yet, all the really fun topics are scandalous and a little bit, you have to get into them and speak your mind, say what you think. I figure. And, like, we
I
will do
mean,
it
we cover
respectfully.
the slavery topic well enough, so we can tackle this one too.
Oh, this one would be, you lose more followers over this one than you would over the slavery one. Oh, you would. There'd be like highly contentious. People get angry, like, fuck you. But anyways, hopefully not. So let's preface it. I wanted to preface it. So let's say, you know, hey, we are not here to be anti-Christian or to beat anybody up. Both Frank and I have a similar view, I believe. So that's why I don't know. It'd be good to do this with somebody who didn't have a similar view. Maybe we'll do that soon. But I wanted to discuss this with Frank, anyways. We had talked about it for a while actually, but we're not. I mean, certainly I'm not. I shouldn't speak for Frank too much. Not anti-Christian. We're not here to berate or carry on or say be one of these people from a pagan perspective saying Christianity is terrible. I still consider myself sort of a Catholic and all this kind of thing. So it's not the point of it is not to attack it completely and just be like, fuck, they're terrible and cause a big stir and a fuss. We want to respectfully point out what we see as the problems with Christianity, in particular from a very modern perspective, just for the sake, so that even if you are a Christian, it should be something you would also want to do and talk about, just to like look at the problems and solve them. I mean, ideally, right? Or, talk about them and get into them. So we're not here to make a huge fuss and to make anybody riled up. Invariably, though, some people will get riled up. If you are a believing Christian and you haven't examined it or thought about it too much, you might. But anyways, that was my preface. What do you think, Frank? Anything else we should say before we attack?
Yeah, I guess that's a good preface. It's not supposed to be an all-out attack, more of a pointing out of certain issues that Christianity has both as a current model and historically, and how modern Christians deal with these ideas in ways that are probably not very conducive towards, a positive outcome.
Well, yes. So there's the obvious stuff. I mean, we can talk about that. I mean, it's obvious to us, but like, say, you know, like unless you, maybe I should ask you to go first. You being the guest, and say what you would, how you would approach this. I know what I would say, but I'll let you go first.
Right.
So how would you start by? What are the major problems with Christianity as you would see them? Like, what's number one? Let's say
All right. There
in the modern.
are, I think, let's say about three main things that would
Hmm?
pop to my mind.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Um, with one thing being its universalism,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Christianity sees itself as a universal morality and a universal faith that the entire world should follow, and therefore it also aims to erase local cultural religious differences, meaning it is pretty much the opposite of what an ethno-nationalist perspective would go for, right? Instead of tailoring itself to certain local cultures, it tries to superimpose itself and replace what the local culture is doing. And
True.
that can be an issue, especially if your overall goal or aim is to create a world where all the people have their own nation states with their own cultures. What is Christianity's role in that as a universalist religion, right? The second problem is its morality in certain aspects. There is an obsession that I've noticed among people on the right-wing Twitter sphere who are Christians, they are a little bit too obsessed with being worried about sin. And there's this whole notion in Christianity of original sin, that when you come into the world, you are born with sin, and your entire life is basically an attempt to deal with your sin and get rid of your sin. And it's a very negative outlook where you have this negative self-image, not only of yourself, but of all the people around you. And everyone is inherently a sinner. And that's a very doomer perspective to have, right? It's not very conducive towards having a positive outlook on life. And third is a certain historical burden that they have, especially in regards to ancient European culture and religion, where I've seen people praise ancient Christian defacings of statues, like an ancient Roman statue that has hacked off and a cross carved into it. And there are Christians who say this was a great thing. They basically acted like ISIS towards our heritage.
Yeah.
And there are people among right-wing Christians who praise that. And really, the Christians do need to come to terms with the fact that early Christianity during the late Roman Empire was essentially the ISIS of its time, and also the social justice movement of its time.
Well, even the ISIS of our time is arguably it created the illusion of the appearance of being a Islamic, and it is, for all intents and purposes is, but behind it was perhaps a dare I say a Judeo-Christian front who had no problem apparently with the destruction of Palmyra and other atrocities. So you can say even today it is arguably like outright ISIS.
Yeah, and also that Christianity in the late Roman Empire was very much a social justice movement that shows certain parallels to the social justice movement of today. And I think that's a historical problem Christians should face, should confront, and maybe think about it. Right, so that's the three main angles.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, no, very interesting. What was the first one again? I wanted to talk about it, and I feel like it's gone out of my brain.
Yeah, the first one was the universalism.
Universalism. Okay, that's the obvious one that everyone kind of picks apart. But it is true because it leaches into everything when you have a Christian society. So there's some very odd things about this, right? So if you look at what happened in Rome, this comes through in the works of Gibbon. I think Evola again summarized it very nicely, and I forget exactly what he said. I think it was in Pagan Imperialism. I can't remember where he said this, but he sort of summarized, as Nietzsche did in his own way as well, the idea that it's a bit of a slave, slave morality, slave morality religion, and it is. It did in Rome appeal to the slaves and the lower classes via its universalism, that every person is essentially sort of equal in some way, and the entire deep hierarchy system that they had and had developed was overturned through a kind of via compassion, which is sort of its weapon. It works via compassion to argue in favor of the underdog and for equality and for charity and things like that. So many things that you can argue are good on the face of them, or can be good, but it's a very harsh thing to describe and explain, especially to modern ears, Christian and post-Christian ears, because those are not necessarily universal goods at all times to be entirely compassionate and to spread equality and universalism everywhere you go and at all times, and think everybody and everything is equal. And it did destroy Rome. It did do its part, and it did usurp via the average person. I think Evola compared it to and it is something that, say, the ladies take up very ardently, or at least they did. Not anymore. Now that it's in the bad books, they don't. But it was something carried through the generations a lot by women, I think, for those reasons, that it is something that there is something in people that finds appeal in the everyman mob mentality of thinking everybody is equal, I guess. Either that or Christianity imposed it on them, and it wasn't there before. I'm not sure, because there's some back and forth here. So they destroyed Rome, and the slaves and the normal peasants and the average people, had their revolution of sorts, like gradually, and they destroyed it. But then in the early medieval period, and even the late medieval period, even though they were ostensibly extremely Christian, they were not. They had some other version of it that was amazingly pagan, where they were like, like the Crusaders. You cannot say they're very universalist people, could you? I mean,
yeah,
or overflowing
they're
with
also
compassion.
not very much in this core biblical tradition. Like medieval Christianity, after the fall of Rome, and especially during the High Middle Ages, you have this sort of development where Christianity takes elements of both Roman and Germanic cultures and takes the hierarchies of these cultures and builds them into the church. And sort of for the majority of people, Christianity existed as a veneer above their pre-existing cultures, right? Where things like the Crusades come from the knightly chivalry culture, but they're under a Christian banner, where the popes that call for the Crusades, they actually had to come up with justification for it, because war is not something that Christianity itself supports.
Yeah.
So they have to
This is back
make
when
up
this is back
theological
when
justifications.
this is back when the popes themselves were like marauding warlords with sex slaves and armies. They weren't. It's funny. It's just a funny, like, there's nothing is ever wholly one way or the other. There's always paradox, and it sort of goes back and forth. So for all our arguments for universalism, it's true. It's an argument that Christians can make, that there has been a tough Christianity that worked and was even fairly tribal. Like the Crusaders were extremely tribal, but even then, beyond tribal, even to the point of paganism, where they were very individualistic and power hungry. Wasn't there stories where they would not only be fighting the Saracens, but they go out there and like just randomly raid a castle of somebody who was like even another European who they just disagreed with or something? Or didn't they almost exterminate the Knights Templar or something like that? Or am I confused?
Yeah, that was a political thing in the late Middle Ages. The
Right.
Crusaders did, for example, take over Constantinople just because they could.
Yeah. So, that whole period is another matter somehow. But we can dismiss it in the statement in saying they were still very pagan, I guess. Maybe, and that suffices. I don't know.
The Middle Ages is a very interesting cultural period because there is the Christianity laying above it all.
Yeah.
But there's still a very strong pagan root behind it. And even Catholicism itself adopted a lot of pagan ideas.
Yeah.
What is saint veneration, if not some sort of mild version of polytheism, right? And it's funny, when you listen to Christians, different Christian denominations argue with each other, you have the Protestants going, oh, you Catholics, you're so pagan, you venerate saints and stuff. So
yeah,
even within different Christian denominations, there is a sort of infighting, which is curious. On the one hand, they have this universalist idea that should theoretically unite them all, but then there's incredible infighting between all these different sects and denominations. Like over here in Europe, we have the Catholics, we have the Orthodox in Eastern Europe, and then we have Lutherans and Calvinists, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
And you have maybe 50 different Christian churches. I don't even know how many there are.
Oh, there's like Jehovah's Witnesses, or like Methodists, Baptists, Jehovah's. I mean, what I don't know. There's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's so many, and I don't know. Not they don't always go to war with each other, but some
no,
of them are
but they have
some of them are pretty radically different than others.
Yeah, they have disagreements, obviously, and they are not united as one church, even though that's the ideal that they have, right?
Yeah. Church of England we have as well. Mr. Monty Fontaine says, yes, the Church of England, which, who was it? Jonathan Bowden said is a wet blanket religion if there ever was one, which isn't very kind. Pardon me, Church of England.
It's just the Henry VIII, I want to be divorced church.
Well, no, they have some interesting, unique, and cool things about them for sure. My father was from that church, and I'm not. But what Bowden means is that they're in the modern context, even more than the Catholics or anybody else. They really just gave it all up. Like they have, I think, gay women priests and things, all that kind of thing, right? So they really
right. That opens up another issue with modern Christianity in particular. Not Christianity in its history. This is exclusively a modern issue. Is how their organizations, their churches, are so open towards these modernist ideas and allow themselves to basically be taken over with the LGBTQ propaganda and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Woodlander makes a point here. Most pagans have no real problem just adding another god to their collection. The church was careful to appease and adapt festivals and practices as well as forcing conversion. The church was careful to appease and adapt festival. Yeah, they were careful as in they absorbed the important pagan stuff that the peasants would just like, you can keep your holiday. Here's, we're just going to rename it and change it slightly. And in fact, probably it didn't even get fully changed in their hearts and minds for like many generations after that. It was just a slow process of it sitting continually, administering things in the background via the Latin Mass, nobody really knowing what it meant or what they were talking about. And it's true though, like in the original sense, that was a strength of paganism, is that when you were a conquering pagan like a Roman or Alexander the greatest conqueror who ever lived. I was watching a show the other day, and they tried to say that Genghis Khan was the greatest conqueror. It was obviously just modern propaganda, because Alexander conquered more land than he did. He was the greatest of all time. And everywhere he conquered, he built gymnasiums with statues of Hercules and libraries, and he actually improved these areas and brought Hellenism, where he was like a crusader for Hellenism. And that was arguably an improvement for, places, Kafiristan and parts of India and wherever the hell he went. But, that was a crusading paganism. But you're right. Everywhere he went, he did not have to change the local religion. He would just say Hercules is synonymous with whatever gods they had.
Yeah, and when he went to Egypt, he even had the local priests bless him. And he went to a local oracle in Egypt where he was declared the son of Zeus Ammon, Greco-Egyptian hybrid god, basically. Syncretism was very strong.
Yep.
And he absolutely had no problems being declared that. Because essentially, paganism, you can look at different gods and see their commonalities. See that it's basically the same deity, but with different worship from a different local perspective, right? Whereas Christianity's approach to universalism means that, also to dogma, means that there's only one correct way to worship their God, and only one correct way to even understand the concept of God. So this leads to all these little splinter factions going at each other over who has the right understanding. We've had that in ancient times. Late Roman times, there was so many.
Okay, what would be an example of something like that from Roman times? Because as far as I can see, you mean you could argue, I guess, how they killed Socrates for not having a absolute devotion.
Oh no, late Roman times. I mean the late Roman times when Christianity.
Oh right, sorry, okay.
Right. Yeah, so Roman Christianity, late Roman, was also very splintered, just like it is today, just like it was throughout its history, basically. We've had things like discussions about whether, how to divide the Son, the Father, the Holy Spirit. Are they of the same essence? Are they of different essences? There was a lot of arguing about all these theological details. And there were riots in the streets where people killed each other over differences in these.
Right.
Where honestly, I think a majority of these people didn't even understand the differences. They just wanted to join a riot club, just like a lot of modern social justice warriors, right? Who go out on the streets and enter a riot. very similar dynamics. Then in the Middle Ages, you have lots of little splinter heresies, right? Like Bogomilism in the East or the Cathars in the West
Yep.
were beaten down by the official church because they're heresies. And then from the Protestant Reformation onwards, you have the mess that you have today, right? Where it's splintered into all these different denominations, and they never really got over that.
Right. I don't see it as a mess when these things happen, or that when anything happens. This is another problem I have with internet discourse over events, especially historical events. And let me say this. I don't think anything that ever happens is somehow a waste of time. I guess I'm a consequentialist in that sense. Obviously, it's God's plan. By the way, neither of us are atheists or anything like that. We are sort of quasi
Absolutely
paganish, deist. I don't know. I'm a Neoplatonist. Frank, what do you call yourself? You call yourself pagan? Or what do you call yourself?
I call myself pagan.
Why
Well,
not?
Platonism is also my jam, so.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, excellent. Shit. What was I saying? Crap.
The mess. We're talking
The mess.
about.
Yeah, the mess.
This
Right.
is not a
So,
problem.
right. Okay. So there's all these people that say. There's even people that say, anytime something doesn't last forever, it was obviously a disaster. Is the implication. So Christianity is a total waste of time. It fucked us all up. Look at it. But I mean, it's gone strong for 2,000 years. And you can't say that, right? You can't. I've heard people say that Greeks and Rome were a mistake because they're not around today. And it's like, you fucking idiot. Like, nothing lasts forever. You know, or like, you know, you can't even say that about anything. You can't say that America was always bad or anything was always bad just because it's ending or it's in its denouement as we speak, it doesn't mean that it wasn't strong and good at one point, right? So you can't say that. And I don't like when people suggest that. So when you said, oh, look, it's a clusterfuck of different warring factions and splinter groups, I mean, it's still going strong in its way. We're not even here to say that Christianity is bad and we should do away with it per se. I mean, I'm not. We're here to say, just to point out the issues. So, and definitely, all this talk is a roundabout way. We're still discussing its universalism, and that is an issue because it permeates, particularly today, with our post-war values, which that is what was capitalized on and captured and defined as the morality of the mob for today, since 1945 especially, is this kind of compassionate, universal equality stuff. Well, since before that, I guess, certainly since communism and the rest. Communism, despite being a secular religion of its own, capitalized on Christian on Christian values of universalism, same as the French Revolution, and anything of this kind ever since that Christianity came around. It's an idea amongst a lot of people that there's an innate sense of justice in nature that somehow makes everybody deservingly equal, and you know, it simply isn't something that was around before. And it's not that it's 100% untrue, as in just because someone's from a different caste or background, yes, they may potentially be just as strong and just as smart as the prince. You know, that can happen. I'm not saying otherwise, but generally speaking, we must.
Yeah, interestingly, medieval Christianity actually had answers for that, right? Or
Who did?
an opposing point of view to the modern sort of universalist view that it has, where medieval Christianity saw society as consisting of various limbs, right? You have the lower classes that have a purpose, you have the middle classes that have a purpose, you have the upper classes that have a purpose. So essentially, God places people into the stations they are born in because they're needed there. You need the peasants to grow food. You need the knights to protect the country. You need everyone is in a place that he should be in. And the medieval idea was that God has created the society as a whole, and if you're placed into a spot in society, that's your purpose. You should stay there and do your thing that you're born for.
Yeah. So, like, historically,
society, yeah.
We're edging back into our slavery talk, where it was like, yeah, so historically your family were stonecutters. You know, you were probably designed at this point. You've been evolutionarily like a barnyard animal, like a sheepdog, designed to be a stonecutter. And maybe you're different, and maybe you can break out at an individual level. But generally speaking, 9 out of 10 of the stonecutters' kids are destined to be stonecutters, and they should be happy being stonecutters. So Christianity works against that in a rebellious kind of way, in more so in the modern context than it ever did in the medieval age. Again, it's been kind of, the universalism has been individualized in this kind of, probably the most by the 1960s, even at this point too, in the very, very modern sense, where they really made the idea that the individual was above all, and which was really there, capitalizing again on also the concept of modern art, where the person, the individual, and the personal expression is above all, of paramount importance, and the illusion of the freedom of the individual being free to do whatever he wants was something they've really capitalized on to bring about the exact opposite.
I think a Christian would counter that by saying, yeah, well, that's basically atheism, right? That's what the atheists did.
That's true, but we're talking about fundamentally Christian values.
But fundamentally,
this is a very good point. You're bringing up
values.
Okay, go on. Yeah. Sorry,
fundamentally, it's the Christian values that set the path for that, right?
Yeah.
The path that modern atheist ideologies went, they had the seedbed of Christianity to grow upon, and a society that was permeated by these Christian values was very willing and ready to take up those new ideas.
Yeah, and in the more ancient value system, it just would not be a consideration. There would, arguably, I mean, there's good points you can say about Christianity too, and there's good points about compassion that you can bring up. But this is where it leaves us today. In this, it's not only just forgiveness, or not just compassion and equality, but forgiveness. And especially today, there's this kind of simpering concept of forgiveness that is really overdone and like sickening and nonsensical, and there's no justice in it, no natural values, and they just live to exhibit their forgiveness, I've noticed, and they will cry and carry on and show their munificent forgiveness for anybody, any wrong anybody does them. I forgive you, and they think this is wonderful, and there's no justice in it. There's no, there's nothing like an eye for an eye. There's no hardness of any kind. It's just like, you just basically renege on everything and you cry about it. And it's
it just shows the criminals that they can get away with it, right?
We got a couple comments I'd like to address. And Willander says, the problem is a peasant sleeping on a piss-soaked straw bed really wants to be living in the palace. Yes, that's true. However, how can we address this? And we must look. It's very hard for people to conceive, I think, of a truly pre-Christian value system. I'm not saying you haven't read the classics. I'm not aware of the thought patterns of people of those times, because it's a very hard thing to grasp, even if you have. But it's not like that whole concept that the perpetual envy of the classes was somehow kept in check and never really emerged at all until, certainly in the Christian age, and then even then, not really till the French Revolution age. The concept that the peasant, I mean, it wasn't necessarily living in a piss-soaked, I mean, some people, I mean,
if he doesn't want to sleep on a piss-soaked straw bed, he should just build like a better bed and keep it clean. Like, that's a simple step, right? Take control of your own destiny in the small scale first.
There's this concept of the past too that's been sort of foisted on us really by our enemies, let's say, but that everybody before the 20th century was living up to their neck in shit, toothless, and they died at like 16. They had kids at 13 and then died. But like, I think Aristotle lived to like 80 something. It's just not true. Like, and even in the medieval age, when everyone was like supposedly filthy, it's all very exaggerated and untrue. But there's that as well. But for the peasant, if you were a peasant and you're a serf in medieval times, and your job was just tending the pigs or whatever, like filthy job, and you were truly a smart person, there was social mobility. There was always, as we brought up in our slavery debate, there was a chance for you to rise above it if you were truly capable. But if you were born into that lot and you were not capable, and you were, generally speaking, if you're born into it, it's because genetically your family was probably at an intelligence level that suited it, frankly. And, this is something totally absent in the modern life and world, even though we can see it all about us as a truth. These kind of harsh truths about nature and life is what Christianity dispelled, that we need some grasp of, I think. Just the fact, the capability of people You know, so you talk about your piss-soaked peasant. What is he really capable of? Just because he can see an eye with envy the prince's palace, does that mean he deserves it? Is he really capable of, running the kingdom, or running a wagon or something? Oh, someone else made a point I wanted to bring up. Sorry, before I lose it. There's Nick Pat says, I disagree with the ancient Christians were universalist and egalitarian in the modern sense, because if you look at what they wrote, they act like borders and classes are real. I think Nick missed our opening where we were talking about the Crusades and that. Maybe. What do you think? What would you say to that?
I think it also depends on where do you see ancient Christianity beginning, right? When you start getting actual Christian texts, they had already become sort of established as the Roman state religion, or were well on their way to becoming established as such. And at that point, obviously, they would be the new authority, and as such, adopt a hierarchy of their own. I did mention that in the Middle Ages, particularly, you had this idea of everyone being born into the station that they should be in, where they're useful. So that is not egalitarian. I did mention that. But the root of it, right? When you look at the actual biblical root of it, the message of Christ, it is very egalitarian. The earliest Christian groups were basically lower class people trying to see themselves as equals. The times when Christianity was still a small sect that was being persecuted by the Roman Empire, that was when they had these egalitarian ideas, and they stuck around till today, right? If you look at modern churches, especially Protestant churches, they are very much online with that egalitarian idea.
Yeah. So he makes a good point. You can point out that, and again, in medieval times, it wasn't so apparent. There was definitely strong caste system, strong ideas of place and hierarchy. And if we look at today, it really has become an exaggerated. Even atheists and secular people of today really have a kind of exaggerated hyper-Christian value system going on behind the scenes, where they
Yeah, I
simply
think
cannot.
what happened in the Middle Ages is that you had all these scholastic philosophers and all of those guys, right? They tried
Yep.
to harmonize Plato and Aristotle and
Yep.
classical philosophy with Christian thought and Christian theology. And they built up this whole societal structure that they justified with lots and lots of books were written about how to justify society and how it works, right?
Yeah.
And how to put that in line with God and how God intended to have the world governed. Now, the problem with Christianity at its core is that the only core it has is the Bible. And from Protestantism onwards, you have all these different groups who say, okay, there's all this stuff written by the church fathers, by medieval philosophers, but what if we ignore all of that and just look at the Bible? And then they come up with their own stuff, and they just go back to the egalitarian ideas expressed in the Bible without any of the philosophical overwork that has been done in the time since. So, yeah, a big problem with Christianity is that you can always just go back and say, all right, I discard everything that has been said by smarter people than me, and will just do my own interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah, there's a willingness there. See, there's a two-sided coin with Christianity. That's both its strength and its weakness, which I've said before as well, which is that it's got that sort of Hebraic chosenite element where if you're Christian, you're the chosen ones, and everything else is evil. This is the other thing with Christian. The other great strength of Christianity is everything is under the threat of hell if you don't do if in proper Christianity, let's say, Christianity proper. If you disobey the rules of it, you're going to hell, and it's very scary. And to anybody that is raised with this message, it's a very scary concept, obviously, and it's a great way to keep people in line and keep them doing what you want, ultimately. But in terms of like what shit, I totally lost my point again. What did you just say there? It'll come back to me. I didn't mean to get into talking about hell. That was a side point. I do this all the time where I try to cover all my
I think
angles
we were
before I get to my
about how Christians, especially Protestant offshoot sects, all just look at the Bible and bring up their own interpretation and
Right.
discard all the philosophy that came
Right.
afterward.
And there's also the evidence of the Nag Hammadi library and how the radically weird texts that emerged there, and how different the original Christianity was, and how anything that's cohesive about it now. This is another weakness we should bring up. Actually, you raised 3 very good points. We're still talking about universalism, but another one we should talk about either now or at some point is like the how should I say, it's a myth that must be taken literally and must be accepted and believed. I mean, most Christians don't, but technically you're supposed to believe the story, right? And the story is quite fantastic and has many difficult to believe parts to it, and even sort of boring in terms of just reading the Bible, slightly unremarkable parts, and sort of a confusing mix of myths of a foreign people, frankly. And even today, this is another weakness of Christianity. You go to mass, you go to church, and you will hear a lot of talk about Israel and these foreign sounding names. Whereas in the old, whereas strength of paganism, at least you must be able to admit, Christians would be to go to church and you hear about, local myths and monsters and gods and names that resonate with you. And it's very similar. It's just that it's the same
there's
thing.
also this sort of hypocrisy among Christians where they say, all right, those stories from the Old Testament about Abraham and David and all those people, those are true, but those stories about Hercules and Odysseus from the Greeks, they're just
so ridiculous. And they're like, you're LARPing.
Right.
But like the Bible has all that same shit. The Bible has giants and dragons and what's that? Go on,
why are the Israelite myths the only ones that are true and not the myths of our own ancestors, right?
Yeah, it's very selective in that sense. Yeah, because most of that stuff they kind of like have long since said, well, this is a hyperbole or metaphor or something. I don't know what excuse they give, but I mean, all that stuff is in there, but in a foreign kind of way, and even like less, and it doesn't just resonate less. It's sort of less philosophical and less interesting in a lot of ways. They really kept it alive for a long time, I think, by it being the Latin Mass and keeping it in Latin. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can see the reasons why. Maybe I can't. It's actually a mystery to me why Christianity took off as well as it did, in many ways. Apart from the fact that, as we said at the beginning, this is the other negative quality. And again, we're like really ragging on it here. I don't mean to sound like we're super negative. The point of this is to bring up the negative quality. So we're going to, and let's just trying to cope with that. But the fact that it, like saying Celtic Christianity, the whole thing was kept going. It was very odd, and it was very pagan, and it was like it supplanted the existing religion, but in a sort of mysterious kind of way that you can just say, well, you're still worshiping God, but just in a kind of new and interesting way. And I don't know that. I don't know. Hold on a sec. Oh, that's okay. And yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Christianity just knew how to implant itself into cultures. Like one of the commenters mentioned before with adapting local holidays, right? And the idea of sainthood that's in the Catholic Church. A lot of the saints have strong parallels to European deities. So essentially, those saints would become replacements. And then saint veneration is essentially practiced polytheism, but given a Christian veneer, right?
Yeah.
Which is a thing Catholics always struggle with, or struggle to explain to the Protestants who say, oh, but you're actually having pagan practices in your church. And then the Protestants say, no, it's not. We're not worshiping the saints. We're just venerating them, which apparently is different.
The Protestant Revolution, really, they look back and they looked at their own roots. And again, they keep doing that. Protestants do keep doing that. Again, that happened with the Jimmy Swaggart evangelist kind of revolution. It was like, no, we must look back at the original Testament. We must take it seriously. And every time they do, they just get more kind of Levantine, let's say. And, iconoclastic. They decide, okay, we cannot have any graven images. We can't have any statues, and everything should be simple. Everything should be simplified. And I mean, it's part of that trend towards progressivism. You can see it in it. It's undeniable in some ways, that idea that you can do away with almost beauty, do away with decoration, and do away with tradition and certain things. Like maybe I'm really reaching here, but in some way, I'm just thinking of like the American trend through Protestantism to simplify until you have just like a basic wooden church.
Yeah, Protestant churches tend to be the least beautiful.
Well, no, there's some beautiful ones. There's some in England, especially. There's amazing.
England is Anglican. They're not your average Protestants, right? Anglicans are basically anglicized Catholicism in a way with a Protestant veneer.
That's true.
But theologically they're closer to Catholics than to Protestants. Right. But no, you've raised an interesting point here. Is that Christianity is it's a religion that looks more into life after death, than life in this world. Right? Everything they do is about attaining salvation after you leave this world. It's all about going to heaven and not to hell.
Yeah.
And this takes away a lot of it just de-emphasizes life in the now. Right? Yeah. At least if you take it to an extreme.
Yeah, that's true. But in some ways, that's also a strength. I'm not sure that's a major negative to it, because that's very Platonist view to things. And in the best of
I think it depends on how you deal with it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a different one. Then, like, that's apart from universalism and apart from one of the hinge things, as I was saying, is the fact that it's a double-sided coin of like you've got the threat of hell, and you've got the chosenite thing where like if you're not with us, you're against us. So, and if you're all pagan, you're all not Christian, you're going to hell, and we may as well kill you. Basically. And that's a great strength and a great weakness. And that's what leads to them defacing the statues. And even today on the internet, today as in modern day, you can see Christian people calling for tearing down of statues and buildings and things. Like, seriously, like, I know it sounds, I have myself, as a poster of traditional arts, had Christians come on and say, take down this idolatrous statue, burn it to the ground. They do carry on like that a little bit. And so that is a negative, because you lose knowledge, a link to the past. You don't just lose tradition, you lose knowledge of history and the ability to we've almost it's hard to say now, it's hard to even care almost, because we're so thoroughly in decline, we've lost the ability to care. Or the idea that a Westerner would care about their past has become like a fond memory. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't know, but I mean, obviously it's a very recently lost thing, and ideally you would care about history. You would care about finding the truth of history and the truth of things, as Frank and I are doing right now, at the expense of even upsetting my Christian followers and etc., who I have nothing against, and I'm not even opposed to Christianity. I'm pointing out the negative points, and this is definitely one of them. That ability to look at history and the other religions and just think, trash it all. It's deface it, burn it down. And a lot of them are like that and will do that. Mainly, again, because of the strength, which makes them, Christian, and makes them want to further Christianity, which is that they're scared of this hell business. They want the heaven hell paradigm. They've come to believe it. Because in any religion, and any person's life, you have a twofold relation to religion. You have the tradition of your people, of which Christianity rates very poorly, because it's not ours. And in that regard, it's terrible. But it does much better, let's say, in the personal schizophrenic sort of LSD inner voice part of religion, where you can become very mortally terrified of it and think, I must obey its edicts, or I'm going to burn in hell, or you believe you want to reach heaven. And it's in the sense of a more recent tradition, it speaks more to that personal schizophrenic part of it. But there's that's the two sides to religion to every person. There's the rational light of day, viewing of religion as your tradition, and even as we are examining the philosophy of it and discussing and thinking about it. And then there's the personal fear of the individual on his deathbed, and that's something else. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that actually is a nice bridge into the second point I raised, which is the morality, also the personal morality, with that core tenet of original sin, right? Where there's this idea that you're born into the world as a sinful being.
Right. Yeah, the guilt part of it. I don't know. That part doesn't worry me that much. So much. Like, what about that worries you and speaks to you today as like a a great problem with Christianity?
I've seen it more as a sort of demoralizing element among some Christians within our sphere, right? Where I've seen people go, "Yeah, I'm such a sinner. I'm not going to be able to shed myself of sin." Things like that, where they have this regretful view of themselves. Whereas from a pagan perspective, you would just take responsibility for mistakes, right? Then own up to it and just try to do better. But Christianity likes to dwell on that element of sin
That's
and
true.
sort of
That's
wallow
true.
in self-pity for a while, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of a part of it. And that's very
Yeah.
self-sabotaging if you wallow in self-pity due to religious dogma.
Maybe that is the cause of a lot of this depression and stuff. Because I don't know. I've never been depressed. Have you? I mean, were
No,
you
long
were you
ago,
raised
probably.
a Christian? Do you have a Christian
I
background
was I
or?
was raised a Christian, but I don't know. I never really bought into the whole original sin idea.
Right. Right.
I like the myths, right? But
You do.
then in
I
my
didn't
my
even like
teenage
myths. I didn't.
years, in my
You what?
teenage years, I got into I started reading the Greek, the Nordic myths, and
Yeah. Yeah.
felt a much deeper connection there.
Yeah.
And then I just left Christianity behind. So,
It wasn't so easy for me. I mean, it's still not. I don't believe we can leave it behind. We cannot be morally those people that we read about in the history books.
oh yeah, morally, I think there's still a lot of baggage left.
Well, baggage, I don't even see it as a bad
It's,
thing. There are good things about Christianity. We're not here to
yeah,
discuss those today. But let's say there's another argument we could raise. I saw recently in this ad, I watched actually today in preparation for this. The only thing I did was watch a debate with Adam Green and some other guy, some Christian guy. I was mentioning it to you. And I didn't even make it through all of it. Most of it, they argued about breeding and population numbers and how Christianity was the greatest thing for this. And I just thought, well, that's fine. But that's a lot of their points where I felt mistaken and wrong. The Christian guy kept arguing that you look at secular societies, modern South Korea, modern Japan, were his great examples. I think he made, and their failing birth rates. And I just immediately thought, well, actually, it's not because they're secular. It's because they're under the wing, the patronage of Mother America, and they're actually suffering from these post-Christian equality values of the progressives and the rainbow flag stuff and the feminism. And that's why their birth rates are failing, which are ultimately, you can argue about them being based in
I mean,
Christianity,
if
but they
Christianity
certainly
is really the
exploit.
best thing for birth rates, explain India, right?
Well, no,
India
there
is
you can
not
there is
Christian.
no, Christianity has been historically good for birth rates, though. You must say it was one of
Yeah,
the definite bonuses of Christianity was it was very, and even today of modern Christians in America, they do have good birth rates. Like
it's very pro-family. That is
yeah,
true. Yeah.
yeah, that is definitely, he does have a point about that. But I think his point he was making about secular societies is wrong, and that those societies are suffering from the disease of America, which is the exploitation of Christian values made secular, but ultimately based around the equality, the equality myth,
Right. It has the
universal.
core of Christian values, but
Yeah.
with all the religious parts taken out.
Mm,
And again, I would say
that's
that if you can say that about secular societies, but good birth rates also exist in other religious societies, not just
mm.
Christianity. Look at India. It's a Hindu country. It has good birth rates. There are Islamic countries with good
It's
birth
pure
birth
Bob's and
rates.
Vagine.
And look at China. China has historically always been one of the population richest countries in the world. They've
Mm,
never really had a strong Christianity. The one time they had a big Christian movement, it led to the bloodiest war in history. literally, some guy in China proclaimed himself the brother of Jesus Christ, and several million people died.
What's this? What are you talking about? I don't even know about this.
That's the Taiping Rebellion. It happened in the 19th century. But
Oh shit. Okay.
yeah, China
I
as a
remember the Boxer
Confucian,
Rebellion, but I don't know the Typing Rebellion. Okay. Sure.
as a
So
Confucian country, right?
there's always
They
some
had
guy. There's always some
Confucianism.
guy somewhere who claims to be Jesus Christ or the brother of Jesus Christ. There's always some guy popping up doing that.
Yeah, there's always some guy.
But that if there's ever a modern cult, they always relate it back to Jesus. You never see a modern cult apart from like something I might do that would like say Mithras is coming back or something. It's always like, oh no, I'm Jesus. And so even if they're not really Christian, they're just some new age jagoff.
It's very Abrahamic
Always Jesus
centered,
and
right?
Christian.
Yeah.
So it's like there's no escaping the idea that Jesus is, in a Western sense, it represents God in some way, or like to tap into that, to have a successful cult and get people on. Even when I see it online, like the people that copied me, the copycat traditional art accounts, they all went for a Christian. If they all went Christian leaning, and that was very successful. I've noticed. If I wouldn't do this crap I'm doing now, if I didn't have these particular beliefs about it, and I was entirely Christian, I would have so many followers. It really is. It really is a way to tap into their consciousness and like into the mob, let's say. But that's again how it always worked. Why it, as we said at the beginning, how it was so efficient in overturning Rome, in appealing to these underdog people and giving them incentivizing them, and making them believe they
culturally,
deserve
Christianity is still this sort of cornerstone that people who are dissatisfied with the problems of modernity, they look backwards and try to say, okay, how did our ancestors do it better? And the first line of tradition they see is Christianity, right? Because that goes back 100, 200, 300, 400, 1,000 years at this point, if not 2,000. So,
well, 2000 but yeah, it didn't even.
arguably,
Some places didn't even convert
started.
until like after 500
yeah.
AD and stuff.
But this is sort of where the first line of tradition that you can latch onto when you become dissatisfied with the modern world.
That's true. That's true. And then they latch, but because it has, again, the other negative point of Christianity, because it has that it's us or nothing. Anybody else who's not us is evil. Then that's where they stop if they really get into it, because they're just like, well, no, you're talking about paganism, you're Satan, get thee behind me, and that's a very great weakness and problem, especially when, like, I don't know if we want to talk about, say, Christians who are on our side of things politically today and the problems with them. I don't know, because a lot of them are perfectly fine as far as I can see.
Yeah, a lot of them are perfectly fine, but then there's the ones who are so radically into Christianity that it becomes a problem for their other viewpoints, right? Where it turns into a sort of self-hatred of what came before Christianity among your own people.
Yeah, and you see them
That's where it becomes problematic.
Not just in regards to their people, but like denying the existence of dinosaurs and things, and I don't know.
Right, yeah.
Some silly stuff.
Yeah, then it just turns into, we're going to take the Bible literally, and everything it says is true.
Yeah,
but then
it's Billy Graham.
Raises the question, why, in particular, the Bible, right? It's basically a collection of Hebrew myths.
Yeah.
Why not the Greek myths? Why not the Norse myths? Why particularly the Hebrew ones?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't understand
and
why
you
it has
get
this magical spell.
Really crazy, really crazy theories of a bunch of Christians who say, I think they call it Christian identity.
Okay,
the people
I've heard of them. I don't know what
the original Jews, right? The Hebrews
right.
that are talked about in the Bible.
Yeah.
Those are our ancestors, right? We are the original Hebrews.
I've heard this argument. Yeah, I've heard this.
Jews today, they're like a splinter group. They're like the Khazars who lived on the steppe and converted to Judaism. That's like the modern Jews, and we're the real. And then they built all these weird constructs where they try to reconcile the fact that the Bible is not our book of myths, right? They reconcile that with being very much wanting to be of their own tribe, of their own ancestors.
Yeah.
So they try to squeeze their own ancestry into the Bible, or squeeze the Bible into their own ancestry in ways that are just bizarre. And
It's
it
crazy.
doesn't really
It
match
is
at
crazy.
all.
See, that's
It
the
just
thing. When
doesn't work.
when you're talking to some certain, not all, but certain believing Christians, you will eventually come across an incredibly crazy argument or suggestion, and the only thing you can do is sort of walk away, or sort of write them off and like, okay, that's crazy, and it's, I don't know, that's a bit of a problem. I mean, it leads to this kind of, I don't want to say, I almost said magical thing, but that's a jerk thing to say. But like, if you can get into belief, it's something that implies or demands of you literal belief. And so if you really delve into that world and insist, I'm going to believe this real because, I want to live forever and go into the golden palace in the sky. By the way, that's also like problematic. There's many problematic things about that's something else we could talk about. Jesus Christ, there's so many things. There's so many things we could, could potentially complain about. We're not
Jesus
even touching
Christ,
on.
indeed.
No, just the idea of eternity in heaven. Okay, so what is it exactly?
Right.
So Brendan heard my exact identity and soul is going to go live forever. And I'm supposed to be with all my friends and relatives and things like some of whom have pissed me off incredibly. Now we're all going to be an intact personality as we are now, and we're just going to live forever in perfect bliss. And like, what shape or form would that take? That we just like, we're going to sit around listening to Black Sabbath for fucking eternity, and like, or what? I mean, as opposed to, you look at the workings of the cosmos. Something, I mean, this is something more akin to reincarnation makes more sense to me. Something involving perpetual change. And the idea of a justice system in human terms that relates living things to a hell or a heaven is possible, because life is so odd and we don't know its true workings, and maybe it is a test of justice somehow at an individual level. Certainly the Egyptians would have thought that. Anubis is going to weigh your heart at the end and see how truthful you were. But I mean, in that system or scale of things, Frank and I would do very, very well for having this brave and truthful conversation about what we think about this business, right? So again, a relative perspective plays in there. And it's hard to know, well, by what system of truth, by what system of justice am I truly being good? Life is so complex and bizarre and changeable that I don't know. There's what do you describe that type of problem? It's a problem of theological logic, let's say, as in, what is heaven then, and what is hell, and who deserves? I mean, maybe a serial killer or somebody deserves perpetual hell for eternity, but Jesus, I mean, that's harsh. Even for that's harsh.
Yeah, but then you also have the concept of salvation, right? Where those condemned to hell will be saved by Jesus if they believe.
Yeah.
And there are also many contradictory ideas and concepts within different groups of Christian denominations. I think the most bizarre one is the Calvinist idea of predestination. They basically
How's that work?
say,
I'm not even sure. I've heard this, but I forget.
God decided at the moment of your birth whether you're going to heaven or not. Only the
Okay.
people who were chosen by God will go to heaven. Everyone else goes to hell, and you have no say about it. It's just a
Right.
lottery, basically.
Calvinists, sons of bitches.
Pretty
What are they?
pretty crazy, but yeah. Then there's the medieval Catholic idea of paying indulgences for sins, where they paid money to the church so they could, intercede on behalf of dead relatives who are in purgatory, so they get out of there quicker. Things like that.
Well, is the proper function of
flexible, these very flexible and inconsistent ideas of heaven, hell, purgatory. How does it work, right? When do you go to one place? When do you go to the other? Can you change from one place to the other? It's all very complex.
Yeah, in Dante's Inferno, like Plato and Aristotle and those guys, titans, absolute titans of humanity. They were in purgatory, I think. They weren't in hell, thankfully. I mean, they weren't in heaven because they weren't born after Jesus. They
We're
didn't know
born at the
about
right time.
Christianity.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know.
lost the lottery.
And like
Basically.
Odysseus, I think Odysseus was in hell in Inferno. I think something like that for being
Perhaps
prideful
because
or
he's so
something.
tricky. Yeah.
For the sin of
Yeah.
pride or something. He was in hell, I think. Yeah. So like this is like fuck. This is you know, where's the justice? I must feel justice.
Yeah,
Let's
but I think
let's go to somebody's question.
theologically.
Okay, go on. Man.
Okay, let me just say one thing.
No, go on, and then I'll ask questions. There's, I can.
Yeah, and then like theologically, the problem with Christianity is that it regards the Bible as this sacred text that has to be taken as the 100% truth, right? So no theological discussion can go outside of its boundaries. Whereas Plato and Aristotle, they did not have these tight boundaries. They could observe the world from a more neutral perspective and come up with their own conclusions based on what they saw and perceived about divinity. Whereas in Christianity, whatever you perceive about divinity must first be interpreted through the lens of what's written in the Bible. If it falls outside of that, then you can't make that observation. It just doesn't fit in.
Right. Yeah, it's very limiting. It's very limiting, intellectually and spiritually in some ways. Yeah. There's something else you had said that I want to say something about. Shit, what was it? I've lost another thing. How many times is that I've fucking lost my train of thought? Jesus, I'm getting old.
Yeah, I think we can go to the comments for now. Maybe.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, but there was something I did really. Hold on, just to see if I can grasp it out of the ether, because there was something we were saying. Oh shit. Plato, Aristotle, Dante. I don't know. I mean, we're drumming up. We're obviously searching for every negative thing we can. We're not necessarily like.
Yeah.
It sounds like a harsh just beat down on every front, but there are.
We're
Okay,
just
so
going with the trains of thought that we have, right?
well, that's true. Oh, like again, we did say it was very positive in terms of family and natalism, and it was obviously very good for that, at least in the past. Now the universalism aspect has crept into, gay marriage and things, and it's crept into in an unhealthy anti-family way somehow. The same values essentially of like that everyone's essentially equal. Those are. It's not. It's not that Christianity on its own would go this way. It's just that they've been exploited, but it is via that mob mentality, that slave mentality. So some questions. Let's see. Mr. Montefontaine says, read Plato. Yeah, I'm not saying hierarchy is unjust per se. It isn't. It's totally necessary for order. I'm just saying nature is harshly hierarchical to the point where it often isn't fair. Yes, we are not animals. We are intelligent beings, and we should seek for justice. That's where exactly my point in a lot of ways, in that we've reached a point, obviously, where we have something unlike justice in the modern West, where we are so compassionate and forgiving that we're so far away from the eye for an eye thing, where murderers and rapists and pedos are not getting the justice they truly deserve, because we're so forgiving and so compassionate, and this weakness just goes beyond and sort of attacks justice from the other side. Where we don't want to be as harsh as nature, like nature, which will, fucking polar bear will, kill all the baby puppies of your dog. Well, my cat had just recently killed an entire nest of baby robins. It was heartbreaking, right? And my cat and I look at my cat and she's so cute and like it's a pretty little thing. And then she's just done this, horrific murder fest. And that is nature, yes. And as humans, we should strive for a justice, forcing a justice upon the world that, let's say, God or the gods would like to see us, I was going to say inflict, but enforce.
I think Aristotle said this very well when he made his point about having to find balance, right? Between being harsh and showing clemency. You have to find the golden path in the middle and not veer into any extreme. And the problem with modern culture is that it's veering into one of the two extremes. And that has problems.
Yes, he goes on to say a baby lion antelope doesn't stand a chance against a grown lion, for example. Yeah, that is nature. Nature does not know justice in the sense that we do. I mean, she does in a way, and we are a product of her. So maybe if we could right ourselves and behave as we're supposed to behave, maybe we would be like the arm of nature enacting a proper human justice upon the world. But this is the thing. This is the thing. In fact, the pagan religion and morality was in tune with nature and natural values. That's what the whole point of going to the Colosseum and seeing, a slave man killed by 1,000 roosters, or a bunch of guys kill each other on a boat. Sorry, I find this funny. Was to remind yourself of this arbitrary harshness and how it was ingrained, baked into the cake, as it were, right? Which is something Christians would deny and think, no, we can't have this. We must do everything we can to avoid this kind of thing. Whereas in paganism, it was just it was an accepted part of things. And they did it successfully. They successfully, ingrained it in their religion, in their beliefs, as nature was sort of paramount to a pagan. And to try and do anything outside of nature's laws was folly. They would try to enact human laws on the world. There would be that, but there was at least more of a respect and a deep respect for the unavoidable nature and nature's true laws, and not to mimic her harshness or anything like that, but to remind yourself of death and your concepts of justice. So we have a very Christian concept of justice. And justice is important, and it's nice to see an eye for an eye, and for humans to perpetuate that in the world where they can, but it's not always possible. And often it comes to a matter of force versus force, the greater force and the lesser force. And understanding and becoming masters of that, is a very pagan, I think, concept, which I'm not sure there's a version of that in Christianity. Would you say there is that understanding? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think an issue in the Christian relationship to nature is that people tend to focus on that part in the Bible where it says that God created nature and then made man the master of it. Right? And
Right.
that leads to this sort of idea that man, as the master of nature, can do to it what he wants. And master implies a position above it, while pagan religions place man as part of nature. The entire cosmos was created by the gods, was ordered by the gods, and we are part of that divine order and not here to violate it, right?
Yeah.
While the Christian approach is to set yourself above the order of nature, because that's what God did by saying man was placed in the world to be its master.
Yeah. That sort of speaks to Nick Pat makes another comment. By ancient, I mean the first 500 years, both before and immediately after Constantine. Well, I mean, that's a very unusual and difficult time
That's a long time period.
Yeah. And I mean, that involves the church, or the Rome being split into two Romes, two empires, and all the invasions of the Gauls and the Goths and the
They've had so many church councils during that time where they clarified certain theological positions, and got through so many periods of civil unrest where different Christian sects literally killed each other in the streets. So
and there was other weird ones. There was other weird ones around then, influenced by Christianity, but not. I mean, the Jews have always been around, but also the Gnostics and all these weird fucking when they were more of like a real thing. Like, I know there's Gnostics around today, but I don't know. They just seem like weird guys.
So like at some point when all those councils at Nicaea specifically were done, it entered a sort of period of stability. But before that, there was just so much chaos and different Christian sects that you cannot say. You cannot make a statement that early Christianity was this and that, because there were many different early Christianities, right?
And there
It
always
was
have
very
been many different.
diverse.
There always has been various different versions of it. What I want to know, in some ways, this is apart from our conversation, is why does the Jesus story speak to so many people, and it doesn't? Personally, with me, and I don't know about you, I never found it like a majorly profound event to hear about it or read about it, like I did with reading Greek philosophy. And I'm not sure why it captures them so. I always assumed it's mostly just the heaven hell threat thing or something. Is there
Yeah, I think
something?
Jesus' story in itself contains a lot of that. Contains the idea of him being the savior character, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in a position where you feel like you have to be saved, that is very appealing.
If you're feeling vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why it was always very appealing to the lowest strata of society, right? If you're a slave, if you're some poor farmer who just lost his farm to bad weather, whatever, you're
So
very
people with
alluring,
anxiety,
very
it appeals
appealing.
to people with anxiety, is that it?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
worry about
Yeah,
it. Maybe.
generally people who think I'd like to have a better station in life, right? Or I'd like to have something better, or this life sucks. I want to get something better afterwards.
So it is very
And
much
Christianity
a
says,
mass movement.
yeah, yeah, you can get something better afterwards.
Right. So okay, let's see this. Read Plato says, as the Kali Yuga progresses, the different classes and races do not correspond to the nobility of the soul. Well, as the Kali Yuga progresses, the different classes and races do not correspond to the nobility. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't know what would you say anything about that? I mean, I was thinking Plato. There's his mention of the eternal light of being, which is an interesting concept, which was tied into the concept of a kind of Buddhist concept, actually, which is interesting as well. This is the kind of thing you will get with philosophy, in Greek philosophy, that you will not find in the Bible. But that, oh shit, my mic just clips. Hold on. That that as you are traveling through life and observing the world, I said this, I think, in my last podcast too. But anyways, I probably rehash the same shit every fucking week. But that there's like a voice in the back, or not a voice even, but there's someone in the back of your head observing the world along with you, that sort of comments every now and again and says, "Oh yes, that's good. That is just. Oh, well done." Or, you know, this is suggested. Would you believe in Platonism and in Buddhism, and as though there's a daemon, as they say, looking out for you, watching over you, which is in some sense your genius or your better self, but is not necessarily you in the totally individualistic sense, worried about your concerns, worried about your life. It's some other thing that's there, commenting on your life and offering the most noble of suggestions. And I don't know. I think there's a kind of truth to that. What do you think about that one?
Yeah.
And there's nothing like that in Christianity, I don't think.
There's something sort of similar-ish in Christianity with the idea of guardian angel.
Guardian angel, I suppose, yeah. But is that literally in the Bible, or is that just some sort of post-Bible manufactured?
I don't think it's actually in the Bible. I think that's more of a
There's so many things that aren't in the Bible
idea
that
that
are
comes
attributed to the Bible.
on. Yeah.
There's so many proverbs of Aesop that people think are the Bible, like cleanliness is
Oh,
next to
right, yeah.
godliness and stuff. It's actually more Greek stuff. So
Yeah, I
this
would
is
assume
the
the
thing.
idea of a guardian angel is also this Greco-Roman idea, right? That
Essentially, yeah, it is, yeah.
sort of came along with Christianity and stayed because it's
Yeah, it became adapted.
It's an idea that makes sense, right? It's an idea that if you're sort of spiritually open, you're going to think about it and say, yeah, that sort of made sense. I can perceive that as being true. And then you just take these observations, these philosophical ideas, these religious ideas that make sense, and a lot of them were incorporated into Christian thought, even though they're not a core part of biblical thought. I guess that's the good part of Christianity again, where they took a lot of good ideas and incorporated them.
Yeah.
When a truth has been observed, they do not immediately reject it. They try to include it into their existing cosmology. But the problem is that they have to, they have to force it inside. They can't just take it at face value.
Exactly. And not only that, but they have to attack. Like it's like you said there, where they don't, like, if you are a Christian, let's say you're a believing Christian, and do you not feel like when we mention all the debts owed to Greek philosophy, for instance, or Aesop even, or Plato, etc., and then your religion tells you that these people are essentially, they're not Christian, they're in purgatory, maybe even hell. Compared, when you see their achievements to philosophy, spirituality, knowledge generally, their value versus whatever value you get from Jesus in the Bible, do you not feel like, you must at least find a spirituality that accepts them and venerates them as they should deserve to be, and not attacks them for being pagans? Like, this is one thing I wanted to get out of this, but this is my main message, because I'm not ultimately anti-Christian, even though we're harping on about all the negative points tonight. There, as we touched on some of the good points, there's many other fine good points about it, if you want to view it as we are logically and critically. But it is, my main thing would be that you to have a paganism, a Christianity that doesn't have the Chosenite at least not the anti-pagan, like in the modern church, Protestant, Catholic, any of them, you don't hear them saying, oh, Hindus are going to hell. They don't attack paganism as it exists in the world. Other than ancient Europe, they will attack ancient European paganism. They won't attack Hindus and other sort of basic pagans around the world, but they will not accept any kind of Nordic or Hellenic paganism. They will think that's Satan, and they will get upset. This is something I would like to deal with. That's their main problem, as far as I can see, in terms of having Christianity survive and continue in the modern world. Ultimately, I don't think it will survive unless it learns it can adapt and do that. Even though, in terms of the post-Christian values, the secular values that are destroying everything in the West, they will continue for some time, and it may seem nonsensical, ridiculous for me to say that. I think there will come a point that will be a very net negative thing, and that if pagans and Christians, European pagans and Christians, can learn to get along, it's very much easier for the pagans ultimately to just say, well, Jesus is also a god. Even they may not like it, they may think, oh, he's Semitic and we don't want to, we don't love him, but very easy to do that. Versus the Christian, that is something I would like to see modern Christians find in their heart. They don't feel the hatred and the Satan is coming to get them over the Hindus. So if they can somehow feel the same way over the Romans and the Vikings and the ancient Celts, etc., and all the rest of them, then that would be great.
Again, I don't mind Jesus. He's my favorite rabbi.
He's good as far as the rabbis go. Yeah, he's a great rabbi. Okay, Nick Pat says, even Paul in the New Testament often says, wives, obey your husbands, slaves, obey your masters. Yeah. Yes, again, the pro-slavery arguments. I mean, you are with the right people for this. Yes. Frank and I love that part of the Bible. That's our favorite part. Yes, that's excellent. Reed Plato says, whereas in the Golden Age, the social and racial hierarchies necessarily reflected the spiritual hierarchy. In the Golden Age, the social and racial hierarchies.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
It's this idea of, in the Golden Age, the hierarchy that we have in the world reflects the hierarchy that we have spiritually. Sort of like what medieval Christianity actually thought about society, where everyone is born into the position they should have they are naturally inclined towards, right?
Yeah.
So we have the aristocrats are all actual spiritual aristocrats who have the soul to be in that position. While in the modern day, in the Kali Yuga, in the age of decline, we're being led by people who are anything but spiritually noble. And I think that's plain to see for everyone.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, there's two. It's difficult. There's the spiritual side of things is again more the schizophrenic personal side. Then there's the purely, let's say, Nietzschean role of religion in society, which is when a basically smart person who can be an atheist or a deist or whatever sort of realizes it's a necessity that people must have a religion, and you look at it as a functional, pragmatic thing, and you start to examine what is the best of those that we must have. That's apart from the internal spiritual connection with nature and your own life and reality. That's sort of something else. Ideally, they can be entwined in the same thing, but generally there's a split there it's a funny bifurcation. So when he says the social and racial hierarchies necessarily reflected the spiritual hierarchy, that's fine. But again, like I said before, this is I can explain this now. Okay, so like I said before, where if you're born into a caste or a system and you're spiritually, racially, or whatever, intellectually, whatever, of a certain caste, you're a stonemason or a serf or a noble, and your family has been for generations, and that's what you are. There was still the room for that social mobility, or that one freak child who's got a big brain or some ability in some specific thing, art or math or something that, and you no longer want to be the swineherd or whatever, and you are able to transcend spiritually and intellectually your caste, and you do. That is always a possibility. So it's not like to say we want to return to hierarchy doesn't, in a pagan sense, doesn't and never means an absolute, total, all-encompassing return to hierarchy where you won't have any social mobility. There's no idea of socialism. There's no idea of compassion for the different castes or classes. It's never like that. It's only that it's so much so the other way, where the definition of how a society should be organized is so completely hijacked and controlled, categorized in a wrong way, that you have to fight back in the other direction. But there would always be some element, even in the most, theocratic, autocratic, pagan imperialist, Roman Empire thing. There was always some compassion, some consideration. You stuck to the hierarchy, but there was always some room to move. We make it sound like it's an absolute, but again, that's a very Christian concept. That everything must be good or bad, heaven or hell. That's the only choice. Where we see things in a spectrum, and that is probably a smarter, more ideal, in a statecraft sense, and in every sense in your life, to view things, or at least view again the Aristotelian balance between the two, where you do have a good and you do have a bad, and you don't lose those as concepts in a fog of relativism. But at the same time, you can see all the stages in between, and you can have a nuanced opinion. Maybe I'm losing my point somewhere, but the point is, as harsh as these things may sound, when you're talking about slavery and caste and stuff like that, even that is, when we're fighting back towards a system like that, it doesn't mean that it's absolutely set in stone. If you were of an ability, you had to have realistically that ability. You couldn't just say, like we do now, we have to treat every person like they're potentially a rocket scientist, when we know from looking at
and that's part of the natural hierarchy of the Golden Age, right? That
right.
If you are of a certain inclination, you will attain the position that suits you.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And not above and not below, but exactly where you need to be. That's sort of the idea of the Golden Age.
Yeah. But this kind of hierarchy is implicit. This hierarchy and the observance of natural values is implicit in the ancient world, and what is missing. not just in Rome and stuff like. Because in the medieval age, you had the same stuff. You had people hanging, and you had criminals hanging in gibbets on the street corners. You had public executions. You didn't have the Colosseum, but you had reminders of death around you all the time on purpose, because death. Whereas today we hide it all away. We buy our meat in the supermarket wrapped in plastic. Some other guys killed it somewhere else. You know, we have the average person is so removed from, to the point now that they become these awful equality compassion patsies, where they can't, if they even think or hear of a violent thing, they think the world operates behind the scenes without death somehow, and they are mistaken, and that falseness will destroy them. And it is an exploitation of their Christian values which has allowed that. But not necessarily Christianity to blame, but it is very easy to exploit that mob mentality if you want to leverage it in an envious way against both nature and human hierarchy. That's a pretty good summary. What do you think of that? No, that's not bad. Of that whole, we haven't even. Am I in my own world thinking I just like wonderfully summarized it? Okay, let's look at some questions. The Bugle says, well, wasn't it inevitable the idea of the egalitarian soul is not compatible with material inequalities? What would you say about that?
Ultimately, yeah, I guess that's the idea, that the foundational ideas of Christianity, right, were what made communism possible. Sort
Yes.
of. There's this train of thought, and I would agree with that to some part, because ultimately communism was built on a foundation of Christian values. Communism is a very, let's say, Hebrew ideology, therefore having similar roots. There's even this idea that some people brought up, that early Christianity, like the super earliest, when it started to spread among the slave classes, or was spread by women and all of that in the ancient Roman Empire, that you could consider this early Christianity to be some form of proto-communism, with including ideas like not really wanting private possessions, things like that, no private property, everything was shared communally among the Christian group. So there is some truth to that, right? That the earliest, how do you say, the earliest expressions of Christianity were quite communist in practice. So I can see where this comparison is coming from. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is Christian values which permeated communism, and I mean, arguably the worst aspects of capitalism. But again, it's not that I want to blame them for that myself, because it's only through the exploitation of them that it has become so. But it is via them, and it's not to say. I mean, what can we say about it? That's more. It's a very difficult argument for me, because it's true. Like, because people say, oh, you know, communism is basically Christianity, and that, like, ever since the French Revolution and earlier, it's been downhill. But again, that's that whole thing where, like I said earlier, when something has lasted 1,000 and 2,000 years, and they're like, oh, it's ended. It was obviously hopeless. It's like, you fucking idiot. No, nothing is going to last more than you're lucky if your civilization lasts 1,000 years, first of all, you know, okay? Even 500, let's say, let alone several thousand. Something like Egypt is an anomaly, but it changed severely over those many millennia. There's another civilization which was even theoretically older than Egypt. What was it?
Oh yeah, the Sumerians, the Babylonians.
Were they really older?
The complex of Mesopotamian civilizations, but also you could say that civilizational cycles become faster as time goes on. Right? We have
So the argument that something didn't. The point is that the argument that something did not last forever is not, you can't just make it and say, oh, look at that, it's over, it's useless. It's like, no, nothing will last forever. First of all, I mean, there's ideally eternal values we're talking about that permeate everything, but it's funny. I don't know if there's a comparison to this Christianity that happened before Christianity in the ancient world. I'm not sure there is. So I don't know about that one. That would be an interesting question.
Yeah, no, nothing would come to my mind because the unique thing about Christianity was that it was a mass movement, right? It was a religious movement, religious and social movement in a way that went through the entirety of the Roman Empire and beyond the Roman Empire. The first officially Christian country in the world was Armenia. The Kingdom of Armenia converted before Constantine. So you have this religious movement that spread across a vast geographic space and throughout, especially the social classes of lower rank, especially in cities. So yeah, the more you look into it, the more parallels you see with modern social justice movements, right? And which parts of the population it speaks to, which locations it's strongest in, cities.
Right.
I don't think there was anything like it in earlier times, just because the infrastructure wasn't there. Right, you had to have the Roman Empire as a big unified place with big cities connected by road networks for it to spread like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Taffy says, in the Divine Comedy, Dante has Satan chewing on Judas and betraying Christ, and Brutus and Longinus for betraying Caesar. Chewing on Judas for betraying Christ, and Brutus and Longinus for betraying Caesar. I thought it was Brutus and Cassius. Pretty sure it's Brutus and Cassius. Longinus? Wait, who's Longinus again? He's not the Spartan guy, is he?
No. There's also a Roman guy with that name. I think there's several Roman guys with that name.
Pretty sure it's Brutus and Cassius. It's Judas, Brutus. When Dante reaches the lowest level of hell, which is frozen, Satan has 3 heads, and he's chewing on Brutus, Cassius, and
Judas. Yeah,
Judas. I mean, and so of them all, you think forever. So Brutus. I mean, so the betrayer, which is cool that he would have such a punishment, but it's also like, okay, it's extremely Italian. Brutus, Cassius, and Judas, okay. Okay, that's fine, but but this is not a, the Dante is not a addendum to the Bible. He's not,
Dante is so very Italian, not even just very Italian, very his city, right? Very where was he from? Was he Florentine? I think it's from Florence.
Dante, was he? Shit, I think it was something weirder, like
northwestern Italy for sure. I know it's northwestern Italy. It's
yeah, I'm not sure. It's a great book. It's better reading than the Bible. It's more entertaining. Like, I remember
those Italians know how to write good literature. Right?
Oh shit, yeah. And even the demons all had Italian names. Like, I remember there's one level of hell. There's like a demon, Scarmiglione, and what's the other guy's name? And there's like people. There's people in a giant vat of shit, and they just like throw grappling hooks on chains at them, I think, or something like that, and just like tear up their back while they're swimming in this shit. Scarmiglione was one of them.
Yeah, it's funny the whole hell having a pit of shit.
Forever, and this is orchestrated by the universe for you to, you're going to go.
That's actually something I learned from my dad, because he liked to tell jokes about that. Where, there's jokes about that in Germany. The one my dad liked to tell was, there's a guy going to hell, and Satan assigns him to room 3A, right? And So he goes from door to door. He opens the door, and there's a guy with shit going up to his chest. And he said, "Hey, is this room 3A?" And they're like, "No, this is not it. You got to go one door further." He goes one door further, opens the door. There's a guy with shit up to his throat, right? And is this room 3A? Like, no, this is not room 3A. You have to go one door further. He goes one door further. He opens it up, and there's a guy with shit right up to here. He has, is this room 3A? And the guy says, "Yeah, this is room 3A, but when you go in, don't make any waste, please."
Yeah.
So yeah, Dante's ideas got all the way into 20th century German jokes.
Oh, the Bugle says a universalizing vision is very powerful, much like liberalism. Well, yeah, it is powerful in that you have mobilized these idiots, and you have commanded the hordes of idiots to rise up and kill all the doctors and lawyers, and as per communism, all their elites. You've exploited their envy, and totally ignoring their actual ability, their literal ability, via a Christian concept that they are somehow spiritually, intellectually, or otherwise equal, despite the reason people fall into certain castes in the first place is because at some point, that's where they fell in terms of their ability. It's not like it was just arbitrarily imposed upon them. Generally speaking, this is another thing that came up in a recent podcast. It was actually with the metal girl. What's her name? The girl from
the one from Bronze.
The Bronze that you showed me. Yeah, she was cool. But she was like talking about the homeless people she'd encountered and how they were like total psychos and like fucked up, crazy people. And that's a very Christian concept in the modern world today. Is that no, the homeless are these poor innocent lambs, and we must do everything for them. We must give them everything we possibly can. Disadvantaged, and all these terms are invented for them. But a lot of them are homeless. Not all of them, but 90%, maybe, or maybe that's
usually in modern Western 80%. Societies, you don't get born into being homeless.
Yeah,
right. Usually,
they're there because they're fucked up
home, and then you fall into homelessness out of usually sometimes it's the government's fault, for example, right? Sometimes you just get fired from your job, you lose your income, you lose your home, and then you're homeless. That happens too. But a lot of people just fall into it because they can't manage to stay out of it. Right? It's very much a place you fall into through your own actions.
Not always. Sometimes it was just misfortune, etc. But sometimes I don't know what percentage of them would be there because they're, there's literally people there who are homeless because they did not stop partying. They have been high or drunk every single day from a certain point in their life, and that's it.
Yeah.
They're not going to stop.
Yeah.
And that is the reason they are homeless. Let's see here. Reed Plato says Christianity was imposed from the top down, from rulers such as Constantine and Charlemagne. Well, that's true. That is true as well. But via the exploitation of the common man, let's say, it has always been a strength to appeal to the common man. I don't know, Frank. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think there's again the difference we have to make between earliest Christianity and Christianity post Constantine, right, when it became established. And Constantine himself was sort of nagged into it by his wife, who was a Christian. So
yeah, someone else says or Tom Bugle, same guy, says Christianity equals first century wokeness that won wars. Haha, maybe. First century wokeness that won wars. Well, it's not so simple. No, definitely not. And wokeness is something else. It's like a post-Christian moral disease. October says quite a few English churches are built around Saxon temples. Yes, and in fact, there's a Saxon font in the beautiful Church of England church in a little hometown in Cornwall, where my father is from, that I was in, and there's an ancient Saxon font, and it's actually very interesting and cool, and like very obviously, I mean, this is the thing for like, this is again the main objection I have, the main criticism I have for Christians is the idea that anyone who's not Christian is evil, and that they must be more open to their own pagan roots, from which much of their Christianity has been grafted onto, not just via Platonism, the philosophy of it, but literally like the buildings, the locations of historic buildings and holidays and festivals and everything else. Like, it's all been interwoven. So I know your religion
Yeah, I
teaches
mean, if
you.
you look at Gothic cathedrals, right, the greatest architectural achievement
Yeah.
in Christianity. The very concept of these buildings has some rather strong pagan connotations, I would say. When you look at the way they built all these giant windows with the express purpose of letting in lots and lots of light, colored light usually, because it goes through those stained glass windows, basically flooding the building with a kaleidoscope of nice, wonderful colors. That's very solar, right? That's very Aryan paganism in a way, in a sun worship way, right?
Yeah.
Like the glory of Apollo shining through your windows.
You know what I've seen that
It's
most
not
exemplified.
something.
You know where I've seen that the best exemplified in my travels around Europe
Tell me.
was Gaudi's cathedral in Barcelona. I don't know if
Oh,
have you ever.
I've never been there. I have not
Well,
been to Spain.
it's again as usual with all these things, a double-edged coin, because there's the old face of the building, which was finished long ago, I think, and there's the new face, which he never left it designed by some artist from the 80s, and it's shite, and it's
Right.
like a total modern, just a waste of time. They're still working on that. But when you go through the cathedral and you see some of his Art Nouveau windows, they're absolutely most insane, colorful, crazy, wonderful things you've ever seen. In terms of what you're saying there, I just found them to be like totally amazing. Artistically, just the use of the sunlight and just like this, it's got this crazy Art Nouveau stone window and these different colored bits of glass in them. It's just absolutely, and like it's displaying itself on the floor or on the wall, and it's totally amazing use of that. Really, really quite something. You just made me think of it there, and whatever.
Yeah, and you get that architecture not directly from the Bible. You get that architecture from the whole medieval construct of a Christianity that blends ancient philosophy, pagan traditions, and Christianity. Right? It's this whole construct of medieval Christianity has so many other elements to it. And particularly modern Protestantism, we've talked about this today before, right? Particularly modern Protestantism, especially in America, as you said, kind of cuts out all of that, all of the cool things, all of the good things, and distills it down to a bare bones minimalism that just doesn't evoke the same.
Yeah. When I was a kid, like when I grew up in the Rockies in Canada, there was if anybody was religious generally there, they would be a kind of Billy Graham Baptist evangelical, and they would be doing the talking in tongues and stuff. But if you went to their churches, there was nothing remarkable about them at all. It was just totally a sparse, plain space. Nothing at all. Nothing, I don't know. That element was totally gone at that point. And maybe it's silly. Like, you look at those mega churches in America. Those big, giant,
those are just terrible.
It's like a sports dome or something. It's not like a church. So
actually, the worst churches I've seen were brutalist ones from the 60s, 70s.
Oh shit, there's some bad ones.
That terrible architect, Le Corbusier, he designed one, and It's just atrocious. It looks, if you go into a medieval cathedral,
Yeah.
it feels like a spiritual place. It feels like a place that makes you feel positive, right? It gives you good vibes. If you go into that brutalist church designed by Le Corbusier, it gives you bad vibes. It drains you spiritually from how it looks. And I think at this point, like when you build brutalist churches, you've completely lost the plot. I think at that point, most Christians in our circles specifically would say that this is not Christian architecture anymore. Because it's completely lost the plot.
Shit, I just realized the time. We've been going almost like 2 hours. Am I right? Shit, we
Almost,
better.
yeah.
We better
1:45.
shut it down and see in here. So I'll run through some quick questions here. Let's see.
Yeah.
King Anus says the history of Europe is amazing. That's why I can't believe we are here. Yeah, well, it's hard to believe. We are still here though, and we must have a new continuation of things. If we're not going to be suppressed, if our ideas and thoughts, which are suppressed, but they're not as suppressed as they were or could be, I guess. So if you can get fresh ideas out there, this is the whole point of this. Like right now is even if you're a Christian, I just mean to point out the problems. Maybe you can have a Christian response that is good and reasonable, and certainly at least I think there should be an alliance with Christianity and paganism, European paganism, not just the New Agey. The New Agers is another thing. I mean, they're weird.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
really
think
weird.
paganism has in some way
Tell me.
similar problems to Christianity in the current day and age, where you have all these weird splinter groups, a lot of them.
In what?
Right? You have these weird splinter groups, of which a lot just lost the plot or didn't even try to get it in the first place.
Well, a lot of them are pretty crazy. They're pretty fucking crazy. I mean, they have some wacky shit. And they're free flowing. They're not like linked to a specific tradition. They're just like, we're spiritual crystals, and we're gonna,
I always used to laugh at Wiccans, but they're not even the worst.
Wiccans, are they still around? Even I haven't even.
Yeah, I think so. They're like I don't know, the fat god chick that claims she's spiritual or witch. She's probably Wiccan. That kind of people are Wiccans, but.
Right. So Bunzy3210 says Abrahamists only seek to destroy and replace. No, this is not the point of this, and this is not what I agree with. Even in paganism, there is a sort kind of a paganist sorry, I think I cut off pagan monotheism, which is certainly talked about in Plato, and other places.
That's more of a
there's supposedly some Roman graffiti that exists somewhere. Where is it? In the is it even in a pyramid in Egypt or something that says that there's only one God and Trajan was his prophet, or Julian was his prophet, Julian the apostate, I think. And that because Julian sort of insinuated, I'm pretty sure it was Julian, for a kind of monotheism based on Jupiter, which would be the most, frankly, Aryan Indo-European solution possible. Something, if to monotheism, which exists to some degree in Christianity.
Julian was a Neoplatonist, right? He obviously he was in that tradition, and the Platonist idea is more of a monism than an actual monotheism, where instead of saying there's just one God, you go into a different. You look at it from a different point of view, where you say the gods, obviously they exist, but they're all part of a greater whole, just like we're all part of a greater whole, and that the unmoving mover, as he's described, is not really a personified deity, but more of a higher plane of existence, right? Sort of the one that exists above all the layers that we can receive.
Apparently, Trump just about got shot, possibly.
Okay. That's an interesting piece of news.
Yeah.
Today's podcast.
Yeah. So make of that what you will. I just got that message.
Wow.
Thanks to Michi for telling me Trump just got shot. I guess I don't know how really, but we'll continue and finish. But shit, I mean, that's funny. That's a funny, terrible. It's not nice that he got shot, but it's an unusual turn of events.
I did not expect that.
Everyone's gonna leave the stream now, but you can, whatever. What can I do? The Woodlander says the land we just bought in Wales is a stone's throw from small Christian church built in the ruins of a Saxon temple. At the rear of the church is a 3,000-year-old yew tree within a grove. That's amazing. 3,000 years. I mean, that's very old. So there you go. He's connected to the history of the place, and that's excellent. I don't know, Woodlander. So what, do you practice Christianity or paganism? That's the ultimate question there. I won't read that one because it's too difficult. The Bugle says the idea of original sin is complemented with Christ's sacrifice, so it's not one-sided. Original sin, you're right. Complemented.
Right, but that still implies that we require to be saved from original sin by Christ. There is no such requirement in paganism. Right?
Hexagram 33 says, hey, do you know that Britain's hidden history site, they claim to have evidence that Jesus escaped and traveled to Wales and continued preaching there? I mean, that's just, come on. That's no.
That sounds like all those theories where every medieval dynasty traces itself back to Troy. Just the Christian version of we're descended from the Trojans.
Oh,
that's
I don't even. It's not even worth talking. It's so stupid. Like, come on. No, I do not accept this. Same guy says, Hexagram 33 says, Andrew Wilson was horrible in that debate. Yeah, he's talking about the debate that I brought up earlier with Adam Green. And yeah, he was horrible in that. Yeah. He was like histrionic and like kept calling him an idiot and like, just like not debating. He was debating like a fucking teenage girl, basically. He's like, fuck you. He was horrible, but there was many, many places Adam got stumped that I felt like he shouldn't have. But it's not like the other guy came out on top. He was too nasty. But right. This is the Christian guy. The Desperate Voice says, was Christianity better for birth rates because it reigned in warrior societies that regularly lost men? I'm not sure it was better for birth rates. I'm just saying it remained healthy in that regard until very recently. I don't believe older societies had problems with birth rates. No one has ever had problems with birth rates.
I wouldn't say that until
the technological invention of birth control. Nobody has ever had problems with birth rates, right? So that's there's that aspect. Am I right? I don't think. I mean, there was a certain problem in Rome where I remember Augustus.
There was a problem in Rome at some point. Yeah, I think Augustus himself encouraged people to marry more and have more kids. Yeah. So, but then again, there were other periods during pagan Roman times where they had absolutely no problem at all with birth rates. And indeed, Rome won a bunch of wars just because they were so good at replacing their manpower, because they had very high replacement rates. So we can't say Christianity is the reason for good or bad birth rates. It's that birth rates are a societal issue that goes beyond just which religion you follow.
Okay, Immortal Rising comic book makes a point that's interesting here. And I'd like to know what you think of this. He says, Christians support what they like more than most others. Excuse me. Then this is a quote apparently from Stefan Molyneux. Christians support what they like more than most others. What do you think about
that? I don't know. I'm going to take his word for it, yeah.
I mean, there's a certain truth to it in that they, because they're working on the binary morality, heaven and hell thing, they obey their laws and edicts more specifically as they interpret them and believe them to be. And so a Christian family will arguably make more of a stand against, I don't know, like drag queen story or something, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think also because conservative Christians are sort of the counterculture today, right? They have more of a voice to use, right? Because the things they support are smaller than the things the mainstream supports. So when they support something, it becomes more obvious that they're doing something.
Right. See, the difference then between them and us, though, as few in number as, say, someone like Frank and I might be, is that, I mean, Frank and I would not.
I mean, we
Both
also
those,
support the things we like, right?
yeah, we would also not. Not only that, though, we would not have the spirit of forgiveness towards them that they might have. We
Yeah.
would be purely. We would let Mother Nature take its course, and quite gleefully in that sense, regarding people like that. The Desperate Voice says pagan gods equal Christian demons. Yes. But this is what I would like to get around. But not in like, because it's very convenient the way they operate now. Like, again, like you're maybe some, really devout Protestant evangelicals will say that Hindus are going to hell and everything. But generally speaking, there's kind of an open attitude towards other religions, as everybody must have in the modern universalist world, Western world. So, I mean, that's been true in the past, but it is changing and should change.
Yeah, I think it's easy for them to go against European pagans because we are a smaller group, right? We don't have the strength of numbers, so it's a lot easier to go against us.
Reed Plato says, ultimately, if you go back enough to seek a primordial traditional, you will find two alternative primitive tribal polytheists or civilizational imperialistic Vedism. Yeah, sure. Some interesting comments. Burnsy 3210 says the Judeo-Christian cannot be allowed to think for themselves, otherwise they might realize they have been sold into slavery. Well, many of them are from a caste that is not about to realize much of anything about anything. This is part of the problem. Immortal Rising comic book says Christianity is the promise to immortalize a person's ego. Yes. Jesus, are we that far back? Are they actually commenting on things we said that far along? Anyways, but yeah, that is a bit difficult in that there are problems, logical problems with that.
Yeah.
And holding on. See, this might be part of the reason someone like Frank and I cannot be depressed. I mean, maybe we can be. I'm sure we can be depressed if enough terrible, unfortunate things happen to us, but not for some arbitrary reasons over life itself. Because we simply don't view it that way, as though we are innately deserving of something. How can I put what I'm trying to say? It's difficult.
I mean, I think the cycle will continue, and so will the soul. And
yeah, it's sort of like we don't
ups and downs.
Yeah, you have to have a certain consequentialist attitude toward it. It's sort of like, what's the term for it? Like, not stoicism, but fatalist, or sort of. You have to accept nature as it is, and you're a lot. And if you've had some good times and a good lot and a good this and that, you should be grateful. You were granted. You were so lucky as to get that. And don't be disparaging, because everything doesn't go 100% the way you would like it to be. Don't expect you think you deserve that. Even like life and nature is kind of a fun ride. It's mostly out of your control in a lot of ways. That's very stoic, I guess, but I don't know. That's what I would say.
Just ride the tiger, right?
Ride the tiger, exactly. King Anna says, is morality valid for animals? No, it's not. Animals will do whatever the fuck they want. Woodlander says, any A&E in the UK is like waiting in purgatory. Yeah, it's about as long, probably, too. You might meet Socrates in there. October says, an animal's morality is to protect its young and family. Well, even then, some animals will eat its young. Will eat their young. It's I mean, animals are on another level when it comes to Mother Nature. They're on that level of totally free-flowing violence at the potentially serial killer level. I don't know.
Yeah, like cats love to do. Yeah, cats
Yeah.
kill for fun, by the way. They're one of the few creatures who do.
Oh, my heart was broken. Just like it wasn't just like that. She killed these baby robins. She tortured them. It was awful. I tried to save a couple of them, but no. I mean, maybe I did, possibly I did, but I don't know. The Bugle says, well, it's because the Bible can't be updated, at least in mainstream denominations. It can't be updated. No, it can't be updated. And it's actually in the light of in modernity, certainly since post-Darwin. This is another weakness. That seems it has many nonsensical qualities and things it says that are just like, difficult.
Yeah, Christian literalists will say the world is 6,000 years old, and that's it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's got some problematic parts. If you're going to believe something, another advantage of paganism. Yeah, Trump has been shot apparently. Whatever. The advantage of paganism is that I don't know how literally they took their mess. If it was a matter of, do you? I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's also big discussions among both the pagan spheres and among archaeologists whether.
But they didn't have a story of like this guy.
Literalists,
They didn't have the story of like a real guy, like a human, who was the son of God emerging in the world. So it was always sort of, they didn't have to take it completely literally, right?
Yeah, you do have people like Hercules, right? He's the son of Zeus, but those are hero stories, right? They're a very different type of mythological story compared to the Jesus story. Like you don't need Hercules to save you. Hercules is more of an example of a great hero to strive to emulate, perhaps.
Here's
we have in the historical example of Alexander, and I think I'm back.
You were okay. You never froze up really.
Okay. Like we have in the historical example of Alexander, who saw himself as being a descendant of Achilles, the mythological character, and who sought to emulate Achilles in his deeds. So the ancient pagan perspective is more one of that, where you have the ancients, the heroes, as sort of being role models for you to follow in life, right? And Alexander quite admirably managed to be another Achilles. One funny detail from Alexander's life is he received a couple of wounds, right? Many wounds. And one wound he received was on his heel.
You're right. That's true. Yeah,
which is the wound that brought down Achilles.
That was in India, I think. Yeah.
So, yeah, you can absolutely look at that and say, yeah, that him being wounded in his heel and surviving is a sign from the gods. Absolutely, like 100%.
Yeah. So King Anna says we are animals. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Immortal Rising comic book. Now this is a very Christian statement. Again, now someone like us, this is difficult because if you're not in your world, it doesn't make a lot of sense. He says all people are equal through their souls and can be forgiven by Jesus. So hate the sin, not the sinner. Now, I know you're a follower, Immortal Comic Rising Book, and a loyal follower, and I greatly respect you, but I must admit that this makes no sense to me at all. Like, Frank, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I can't work with that sentence because I don't follow its presuppositions. It's just...
Yeah, and not just that, it was like they're not even like all people are equal to their souls and can be forgiven by Jesus. So like there's your presupposition is so you're not giving us evidence for something or anything like that. You're just saying, making so much of the Bible is like this. It's like a statement, like an almost threatening statement where you like believe it or else. all people are equal through their souls and can be forgiven by Jesus. Well, okay, maybe, but what's the proof that they're equal through their souls, or that they can be forgiven by Jesus? Or if you don't have proof, even, what's the point of saying it? So hate the sin, not the sinner. And you reach a conclusion, a concluding statement about what we should think morally about something, and you have not provided anything other than a kind of biblical statement. This is the kind of thing that you would not find in Plato or other spiritual texts.
I would probably come to a similar conclusion through Plato.
Yeah, maybe you would. Exactly. But
The
at least you would
action
provide an
is,
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can agree with the idea that when a bad act is committed, it's the act that is bad, and not necessarily the entire person that performs the act.
I do believe that people should meet justice when they've made decisions that are
absolutely
so bad.
But if you perform an action, you should be held accountable for that action.
Yeah.
Right.
If you have tortured some innocent person to death or something, I believe you should suffer the same fate.
Yeah.
You should feel the same thing.
Retribution and Justice, which is actually in the Old Testament, that is a part of at least the older part of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Which is, again, in the tradition of older pagan faiths of the region. I am pretty familiar with Mesopotamian stuff, and they do have laws that explicitly state, if a man does this and that to a man, then it shall be done to him in return. Right?
Yeah.
And the purpose of the law and justice is to figure out, was it done on purpose? If yes, then retribution and justice is applied.
Yes, exactly. And that's how it should be. That is justice. Yeah. October says, Christianity came between family, Luke 14:26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be. Yeah, I've heard this as a sort of the communist-y quote from the Bible, but he also makes other statements that contradict this. It's the other thing about it, is that there's not a clear and defining philosophy per se. Even about these laws and rules, he's laying down that under the threat of hell, he says these contradictions.
Even in the Gospels, you have these different people who wrote down different accounts of the Gospels, right? And they all have slightly different opinions on things, so you get little inconsistencies like that. And
even you think with something as clear as something you want to be very strictly clear on, as in you will go to hell if you don't do it this way. That they would get it right. So I mean, that's a bit.
And these contradictions, they never use logical strings of arguments, right? Unlike when Aristotle disagrees with Plato, he tells you why, and he gives you a string of thoughts so you can follow it and agree or disagree. You don't really get that in the Bible. You have to buy it as it's there.
Okay, look, here's a statement that I really strongly disagree with. This is the type of thing I really do not like to see. And I'm not to pick on you specifically, the Bugle. You've made many excellent comments so far. But the Bugle says, in spite of all these things, Christianity is still the greatest civilizing force in history. Now, it's almost as though you haven't heard a word we've said about the civilizations that predated the Christian and all the good things that we have in our modern civilization that really we are indebted to the pagan civilization for, which is most of the good things. So how can you say that?
For 80% of civilization, at least
it's pagan.
I can draw a line.
The word civilization has a Roman root, civis.
Yeah.
It means does it mean law or something? Whatever it means. It's not a biblical word.
Civitas, society, basically.
Society, is it? Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you can draw a line. You can or just list pre-Christian high civilizations. You have the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, and that's just in the Western sphere. You have the Chinese in the East, the Indians, who both built up their own great civilizations, and all of them did that without Christianity, before Christianity even existed. And Christianity itself was brought into an already civilized world. It required civilization to become what it is. Without the Roman Empire, in its stable form that allowed Christianity to spread, right? It would not have spread like it did. And I think what he's talking about is Central and Northern European societies, like Germanic societies that built up their civilizations in the Middle Ages, that became civilized later on, while Europe was Christianized. They built that civilization on the ruins of Rome. It was not Christianity that civilized them, but the remains of Rome. And you see that in like the earliest Christian great civilization, let's just say, the Carolingian Empire of Charlemagne. He explicitly revived classical Latin teaching among his monks. So it's very Roman. It's a resurrection of Rome. It's not Christianity that civilized us. It's Rome that did.
Yes. So let's see here. The Woodlander says, I live the most pagan life. At this point, I'm 40% tree, 30% mud, held together with 30% chicken shit and dog hair. Hail nature. Yes. Well, that's it. That sounds good. You're truly living the golden bough life. And Mortal Rising comic book, the guy who made the very Christian comment said, a lot of emotional projection. If you're talking about us, I don't think we're making emotional projection. I think we're making, it's not like we can ever be completely free from bias, but I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can. And I don't feel emotionally invested in, I don't think what I'm saying. I believe it is, rational and so forth. You can never be free from bias no matter what you do anyways, but emotional projection, I don't think we're being like histrionic and making crazy emotional arguments. So I would not agree with that. If you're talking about us. Bugle says, isn't everyone rich and powerful? Even powerful men have anxiety. So, geez, these are from way back. I must be so far back in these fucking things. I should just stop reading all the comments. It was easier. I don't have any super chats now. I'm demonetized for a Ted Kaczynski video until August.
Right. Of all the things you did, it's Uncle Ted that got you demonetized.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was totally praising him or anything. Even just to have a video about him. Apparently, he's become a contentious terrorist figure. Well, I suppose he always was. But Woodlander says, I found the untold story of Jesus as a child being taken by Joseph of Arimathea around the world to study different religions and cultures quite interesting. Do you know anything about that? I don't know much about that.
It's been a very long time since I've read the Bible. So
yeah, no, I don't know anything about that. The Bugle says Jesus can appeal even to strong men because he has for most of history, all men except perhaps the king have a master. Well, that was true before as well. That was like that was true in the pagan societies. The king also
even
looked
in
up
pagan
to
society, a king is beholden to the gods.
Possibly he was a god as well, but only a lesser god, like a demigod, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's not an argument. He says Jesus is the righteous master, so even strong men can follow him. That again is just a statement. Jesus is the righteous master.
How is Jupiter?
How is he the righteous master?
The righteous
Well,
master?
Why is he the righteous master? Yeah, there's not.
Like again, from a pagan perspective, how are the gods not righteous masters? How is Jesus different from the other gods in that regard? Right?
Oh, and this is interesting. MPH Jackson 7 says guardian angels are implied in the Bible, Matthew 18:10, but not super explicit. So whatever. Anyways, let's see. The Desperate Voice says they love meek heathen races of the world. They're ripe for conversion. I'm not sure what he means. We're past this conversation, whatever it is. Mr. Monty Fontaine says, does the Christian God acknowledge the other gods, or when he says there are no other gods before me, he means he's the only one? Exactly. Like, why is he obsessed with that? And why would it even be an issue? Why would he have to send a son to dispel the other gods? If he's the omnipotent God, why would he even enter the possibility of other gods into men's minds? That he has to go through this whole rigmarole. They say that the reason is invented afterwards, in that after the fact, and that he's testing you. But again, that's more of the schizophrenic
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Like originally, you can trace back the rule that thou shalt have no other gods before me to a time when even the Israelites had other gods, and Jehovah, let's just call him, basically put himself above all the others, and it started out as monolatry and then slowly turned into exclusive monotheism.
Someone says Trump has been shot, and then someone says Trump shot during a rally, ear grazed. So he sounds like he's shot in the heart or anything. Ear grazed. Well, we can
Right. Okay.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah, obviously the liberals who shoot him aren't good at aiming, because the people who are good at him
It's probably
don't
some
like
crazy
him.
guy. He's not even. It could be a right wing guy that just doesn't like his.
Or it could be someone paid by the CIA to do it. Who knows?
Oh, Jesus Christ! At this point, yeah. D. Salin 7 says most modern churches look like a government office crossed with a warehouse. Yeah, it could be like some building, some part of the EU or something, which is basically like a use.
Like, look, I love old churches. I think old Christian religious architecture is great. Modern Christian religious architecture has nothing more to do with religious architecture at all. It's just shit modern architecture. There's nothing religious about it anymore.
Exactly. Moktuk says, I once saw an atheist Wiccan. They're an odd bunch. Yeah. I used to know some Wiccan, but in the 90s I knew some Wiccans. But as far as I can make out, they were just like hippies getting together to have like group sex. It wasn't like I didn't.
Yeah, they're just wanting to play at spirituality. So.
It wasn't. I just thought they were just like trying to be sensational, like sort of like Satanists, like just kind of show off my be rebellious and like throw something in your face, like look at me, like a needy person who does things to show off or something. Someone else says Trump, if he survived, he has mad street cred now. Yeah, imagine if he staged the whole thing, just like you got to shoot me in the ear and I'll be like, I'll win for sure. That's funny. Area Trans says, my two central problems are people getting mad at me interpreting the Christ internally without the sacrifice and the turn the other cheek nonsense. My two problems are people getting mad at me interpreting the Christ internally without the sacrifice. Do you know what that means? Like, I can't make sense of this talk, guys.
I think he has to clarify that, because I feel the sacrifice of Christ on the cross is the central theme of Christianity as a religion, right? And if you interpret him without the sacrifice, what's left? I don't get it. He has to clarify that one.
Yeah, if you want to clarify, I don't know what you mean. Someone says, Area Trans says, my two central problems are getting people mad at me interpreting the Christ in... Oh, that same guy. Oh, the same guy says, I'm aligned with Lucifer and find the idea of sin to be ridiculous. Okay, well.
Okay, we got the Satanist in here.
See, that's the kind of showy Wiccan stuff to me, because it's like, if I abandon the entire biblical pantheon because it does not resonate, or I feel it's foreign, and for the reasons that we've outlined, like I'm not going to suddenly include Lucifer just to be edgy and weird. Like,
I feel Satanism is sort of a knee-jerk reaction to Christianity that still acts within the framework of Christianity.
Yeah, it's
and broader Abrahamism. Like it's you're not rejecting Christianity if you just embrace the bad guy from Christianity. It's completely ridiculous. But then again, Lucifer as a name has been used specifically by Miguel Serrano to refer to Prometheus, but I don't think this guy is following that particular interpretation.
Yeah, let's see. Hold on. Hold on. Oh yeah, he got shot in his ear.
Yeah, that does
I'm
give
gonna
him
shut up.
that street cred.
I mean, I sort of care. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
sure.
Trump thing. Someone said Woodlander says that will be a blessed distraction from the sports ball tomorrow. The fact that Trump got shot. Yeah, we should be thankful. Yeah, they get shot in the ear. Maybe this means he'll win for sure. It's not exactly like Roosevelt getting shot, and he had a Bible. Was it a Bible or a book? I think it was a Bible in his vest pocket. You hear about this? The original Roosevelt, not the shitty Roosevelt.
Yeah.
The tough Roosevelt. He was, I think it was Roosevelt. He was given some kind of speech campaigning. Someone shot him, but he had a book in his jacket vest, and it lodged the bullet. But it still went through it, and he was bleeding and stuff. And I think he like grabbed the guy and beat him up or something. Like bleeding from his chest, like, or some I forget the details, but something like that. And it's like, oh fuck yeah, that's great. Totally unlike today. But so Trump is not exactly at that tier. That's it.
He's not quite that tier, and I think he's too old at this point to just go out and beat up a shooter.
Yeah, maybe he'll drop
He's
out.
fit for his age, but at this age, you don't do
He
that
should
kind
get a
of thing.
little golden insert for whatever part of his ear is missing. You should have like a solid gold earpiece that he puts in. That would be cool. Donald Robertson says, even though I'm not diametrically, okay, what does he say? He says, I'm not diametrically opposed to where y'all are at. UBS. What does that mean? As in the letters B and S, as in we're bullshitting. He says he's not diametrically opposed, but UBS. I don't get it. What are you saying? Okay, so the last two comments of the Woodlander, and then we're done. He says, that will be a blessing. Okay, he said that. Ever watched the film Betrayed? No. Have you?
No, not that I know.
Not that I know of. Yeah, maybe I have, but not enough. Anyways, we are done here. It has been a long time, 2.5 hours. Trump has been shot, and we have outlined for you the problems with Christianity. And the problems are, there's a few. There's a few. So
but
they're Christian.
they're solvable, right?
Yeah,
it's not like they aren't solvable.
Well, some of them are not solvable. Some of them are. Maybe they're all ultimately solvable if you look at it a certain way. But either way, we've done that. And I think to a fairly intense degree and all-encompassing degree, we really did cover. There's even more ways we could criticize it probably, but I mean, that's enough. So say goodbye to Magic Frank S. Oh shit, there's comments I missed. Should I just ignore them or what? Oh shit. Oh, there's a whole bunch. Oh fuck this. Oh Jesus, no, we'd be here all night. I can't do it, guys. I gotta go inside. I'm tired. It's been like 2.5 hours. So yes. We'll do it again. We'll do it again soon. Yeah? You wanna? Something similar, anyways. You can comment and ask us questions. So you sons of bitches. I shouldn't even be asking questions that aren't super chats. Anyways. So goodbye. Thank you, Frank. Enjoy your time in
see you guys
out there in Central Europe. And goodbye.